I always say boundaries always work. When people say boundaries don't work with this person, you don't understand. They always work. They either work because the person says, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I won't do that anymore. Or they work because that person escalates and basically lets you know you're not allowed to exist in this relationship. It's all about me.
83% of Americans identify as not very happy, which can hold you back and negatively affect your relationships and your business. On this podcast, we discuss the proven steps to happiness so you can restore balance and rekindle your joy.
Welcome to another episode of How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs. Hope you're having an amazing day. It's been cloudy here for many, many days, and we've got a guest from a sunny Arizona. So today we're going to be talking about relationships. We're going to talk about negative self-talk that happens with way too many people and the effects these have and how we can overcome them. So Shannon, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me, Brad. I'm doing great.
Awesome. So let's jump right in. How does negative self-talk affect our mental health? And what are some effective strategies to change these ridiculously tough internal narratives?
It's such an important question. I'm so glad that you asked it. And what is really remarkable is that we bring these messages with us from childhood. We don't even realize we're saying these things to ourselves inside our own heads. And it actually changes everything. When we are toxic towards ourselves inside our own heads, we tend to resonate with other toxic people. We tend to allow toxic behavior towards ourselves. We make terrible choices in our lives. We run ourselves down and scare ourselves and freak ourselves out. And all of it is coming from inside our own heads. That narrative is just incredibly informative to everything that we do in our lives.
Yeah, but so before I go on and ask you, how do we change that? I wanted to share a couple stories with you. One is I heard in the last month or so, I was reading something or listening to a podcast that our minds don't know the difference between our negative self-talk and a complete stranger. And what happens is it releases cortisol because it puts you in a fight or flight state. And what is cortisol? It's an inflammatory. What's the basis of probably, some people argue, 80% of all disease, illness, and autoimmune? Inflammation. So Stop talking negatively to yourself. The other story I wanted to share is I play a lot of pickleball. And there's a lot of people who have negative self-talk and they'll hit a bad shot and they'll be like, you idiot. And I'm always like, no, you're not an idiot. You just hit a bad shot.
Mm-hmm.
So how do folks who are struggling with this change this narrative?
The first part is really to notice it, because oftentimes people are just oblivious to this. When I was in my early 20s and went to a therapist, and she asked me to write down all the times that I talked badly about myself. And first I thought that was a really dumb assignment. And then I started to do it and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And living in my head was horrible, but I didn't even notice it until she brought it to my attention. So first thing is you have to notice it. You have to notice, what do I say to myself when I'm feeling frustrated or sad or disappointed or scared? And you'll find out so much. And actually write them down. What are the main messages that are your go-tos? And then you have to look at where those came from. We're not born thinking those things about ourselves.
No way.
We have those things imprinted on us from childhood. Now, it could be parents or siblings or peers at school, or it could be lots of different people, a teacher. Lots and lots of different people impact our lives. And it isn't just what happens, it's how we internally narrate that. So that's a little confusing. If we have a depressed parent, is a good example, because that depressed parent maybe never said anything mean to you in your life, but having a depressed parent makes you feel like you're not enough, you're not good enough, you're not anything enough to make them happy. So it's a very twisted thing, but you feel not good enough, even though nobody ever said that. So we have to notice not only where that came from, but how sometimes we created that. Sometimes somebody is calling you an idiot and then you internalize that. But a lot of times it's our own story around what happened to us. So if there's a lot of chaos in the home, sometimes we'll internalize a lot of different messages around that, like the world isn't safe, or I'm powerless. So that can become sort of a toxic passivity. So there's lots and lots of different things that happen. So that's really important to notice it and then write down all the toxic messages.
So, as a child, when you have a parent that's depressed, why do we get into a state of negative self talk? And how's it serving us at the time?
Well, I think that kids are naturally self focused at certain ages. And we actually create our primary narratives for our entire life before the age of 5, which is scary because we're not rational at 5. We don't have a bigger picture at 5. We don't know why mom or dad is depressed, and so we make it up, and it may or may not serve us. So sometimes people make up stories that actually serve them. Sometimes they're just really self-destructive. So we have to notice what happened, what we thought about it, how we narrated that, and then if it's serving us or if it's really destroying us. Sometimes we think, well, if I'm really, really perfect in school, then mom or dad will be happy. So that's kind of functional in a way because you become a good student. But it's also, that's the person that doesn't necessarily get help until they're in their 20s and they crash and burn out in job after job. And then you trace it back. And it's because you felt like you always had to be perfect because the family was so chaotic.
Yeah, I had a mentor one time say that why do adults have perfectionist traits? And it's usually because the imperfect child wasn't good enough. So they had to try to prove they're good through being perfect. So I want to go into relationships, but before I do, I want to tell the listeners that if you are thinking or wondering, do I have some of these narratives from my childhood before the age of 5? I've heard 7, so that's interesting. To 5, I mean, we're in this hypnotic state for the first 5 to 7 years of our life. So if you're curious, if you have some of these thoughts that are buried in your subconscious mind, driving negative behavior, driving bad relationships, bad business, do yourself and your family, your health a favor. Go to unlocklimitlessyou.com/quiz and take this 3-minute quiz that will show you your level of self-love. This may be a step on a journey that will forever change your life in ways that you can't even imagine. So Shannon, let's shift a little bit towards healthy relationships. What are some key characteristics of a healthy relationship, and how can someone assess the health of their current relationship? Because I think I've been in relationships that I know I was in relationships that I thought were very good for years. And as I look back, they weren't.
Yeah. So first of all, you have to have a healthy relationship with yourself, as we were talking about. And the essence of it is that your thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs have to matter. So first of all, my thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs have to matter to me. I have to notice what I feel, what I think, what I want, what I need. That doesn't mean that rules my world, obviously, because there's a lot of other things going on, but that has to matter. And a lot of times I work with people who are in toxic relationship after toxic relationship, and they don't even know what they think, feel, want, or need. Literally, when I ask them that question, they're absolutely, no one's home. And that's indicative of a person who grew up with that and who has recreated that. Not that we're choosing it, it's just that it resonates, okay? So if you're that person who kind of grew up in that chaos, and someone really healthy comes into your world, it's kind of like weird. And then someone chaotic and moody and angry and all the things comes into your world, and you're like, oh, that's home. And so it isn't conscious or, oh, that person's so stupid. No, these are smart people. We are all pretty smart people, and I've done it, and you've apparently done it. So yeah. So we have to first have a good relationship within our own selves. And then we have to notice that as we get into a relationship with another person. So our tendency is to want to put on our best selves and be people pleasers and placaters. And if you don't show up with your whole self, then you're kind of setting the relationship in motion in a really toxic way. So that you're always paying attention just to the other person and their moods and their thoughts and their feelings are all that matters. And you're not sharing what you think, feel, want, or need. You're setting that in motion in a sick way that's going to come back and bite you. But if you're going into a new relationship, make sure that you say, hey, I kind of need a break. I need to, take care of stuff at home tonight, or I'm just going to chill, or like, don't be people pleasing all the time. Don't be always accommodating the other person. Really notice what you're thinking and feeling and share it. Now, if the person is a person that could be a potential relationship, they're going to honor that and they're going to respect that. The person who has some toxic tendencies, they're going to do these little microaggressions. They're going to pout or get irritated or say, well, I guess you don't care about me as much as I care about you, or, some sort of little microaggression, which if you're not aware, you could use to sort of train yourself to stop doing what they don't want you to do and do more of what they want you to do. And then you cease to exist over time. I've even had couples that I've worked with, and the one person went into it really not owning themselves at all, not showing up for themselves at all. The other person, toxic. But when we sorted it out and kind of had it out and set new boundaries, the toxic person was like, oh, well, I didn't realize I was doing that. So when we set new boundaries and we show up entirely, we give that other person and the relationship really a chance to grow into a full relationship.
Wow, you said so many things I want to comment on. I love them all. If you do go take that self-love quiz and you score negative self-love or lack of self-love, I should say, there's a good chance have your spouse or partner take it and they probably will score the same thing, because it's very, very rare that if you lack self-love, you're going to go marry or be with someone who has extreme self-love. Because just like you were saying, Shannon, it's weird. Like the two just don't gel. And to me, as long as I've known this for I don't know how many years, couple of years at least, it just fascinates me. It fascinates me that if you grew up and your mom or dad were abusive to you, physically, mentally abusive, the chances of you getting into, even though you're like, I hated that, the chances of you getting into a relationship where the partner is abusive is very, very high. And you're, like you said, you're doing it unconsciously. So it's amazing. My shirt that I have on right now, it says, the only diet that works is self-love. So just your answer to the question was, what's a mark of a healthy relationship? Well, first, you've got to be in a good relationship with yourself. And unfortunately, so few of us are in a good relationship. So just like with anything, I believe self-love is like the basis of a good business. It's a basis of good health, good relationships, good, good behavior with your kids, good relationships. So it's, I did that. I repeated the pattern. I married my father. I didn't like the way he treated me, but I unconsciously married my father.
So I'm going to jump in and argue with you for a second about both people are the same, because that's not necessarily the case. In that I did a video on my YouTube channel a few years ago that's called the empathic person and the malignant narcissist, a tragically perfect match. So you want to notice that oftentimes we are a perfect match for somebody that is completely self-centered, completely obsessed with themselves. Now, yes, they have an empty sense of self underneath all that, but the stuff that it shows is they're self-centered, self-obsessed, lacking empathy, lacking care for anybody. They don't really think that you have emotions that are worthwhile, so they don't notice them. So it's almost an opposite, where you don't care about yourself, your thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs, and they care only about their own thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs. and you match up with them because you are that caring, giving person, and they neglect you, that you live on breadcrumbs. And so that becomes that interlocking enmeshment that's really hard to change.
Yeah, so I agree with you. So there's no argument here. Let me clarify what I was saying. The narcissist and the empath, yes, they're completely opposite in that regard, but in terms of their self-love, they both lack self-love, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
well, and actually, to dive a minute deeper, the narcissist. So there's a lot of argument about this, but in general, there is some lack of empathy at a genetic level. Okay, so there is some sort of organic component to narcissism. So they tend to lack empathy, be less empathic than people who become empaths. But there also are two tracks. So for some narcissists, they grew up in really abusive, neglectful homes, but I've also met a lot of them who grew up in indulgent homes where they were kind of worshipped, kind of put on a pedestal, never given any boundaries or foundation of rules and enforcing empathy or encouraging empathy. So some of them really do have what looks like self-love. It's not a genuine self-love because they don't know themselves. It's a facade of self-love. So that can be confusing too. And so we have to kind of
I get you. Maybe we have to come up with a special super duper quiz for that type of stuff first. So Shannon, why have you chosen this particular focus in your work, and what drives you to help others in this area?
Oh, great question. I think that early on, I wanted to be a veterinarian or a doctor and went off to college but I made a mess of my life because of my own choices and relationships in late high school. And then I tried to get into therapy in college, and I ended up with the worst therapist ever, sadly. And she took my life that was kind of a train wreck and she made it worse and just kind of reinforced the twisted thinking I had and didn't ever bring anything to light about my upbringing or how that was impacting the decisions I was making. So I think I became a therapist because I was trying to figure it out. And then, as I figured it out, I wanted to help others not have to go down the road I went down. And then about 6 years ago, I decided I wanted to start a YouTube channel because I didn't want to write a book, and I wanted to share all the stuff I've learned with a wider audience, and people seem to be watching YouTube, so I did that. It's called Therapist Talks, Thrive Beyond Narcissism. And the last part came about because as I started this channel, I was doing a lot of different mental health issues. And this is the thing that people kept zeroing in on: relationships, toxic relationships, narcissistic relationships. So that's what happened. Then I decided I had to write a book anyway. So I wrote the book, Out of the Fog, Into the Clear, Journaling to Help You Heal from Toxic Relationships. And I use a lot of journal prompts to help people really work through that. And then I went from there into creating a coaching program and masterclass for people who really want to take the deep dive into healing and really taking care of themselves in a totally different way moving forward.
Interesting. So I don't want to spend a lot of time, but I'm really interested to hear about this therapist that you work with. What was it that this therapist did that was so, whatever word you want to throw in there, not helpful?
She smiled and nodded empathically, and that's all she ever did.
That's all.
She had no insight, no feedback. And people love Carl Jung and Carl Rogers, all the old standards, but honestly, they were useless. That if you don't bring anything else to the table, if you're not learning anything from your therapist every week, you need to quit them and find somebody else. You should be learning. You should be learning how your old templates from childhood are coming to life every day, and how the stuff that bothers you today is more than likely very old and you need to sort it through she did nothing. She smiled
Yes.
and nodded and patted me on the back and sent me on my way. And I kept making a mess. So
Yes.
it
Yes.
was
Yes.
not very
Yes.
satisfying.
Whether it's shutting down with your spouse or someone cutting you off in traffic and you go ballistically mad, it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with what your spouse said. It has nothing to do with the person in the car. It has to do with what Shannon said probably happened between the ages of 0 and 5 when you didn't even have a logical brain. It wasn't even formed. So I say over and over and over again, if you're an addiction, you have an addiction, you have a bad marriage, you're obese, whatever it is, it's not your fault. It's just your body and your mind trying to protect it from something that happened years ago. Doesn't mean it's not your responsibility. When you gain an awareness, if you've listened to this podcast, now you have an awareness. This stuff that's driving you crazy today and this negative behavior that you can't stop has nothing to do with today. So once you have awareness, now you do have a responsibility to yourself, to your family, to your health, to your business, whatever, to take the first step. Reach out to Shannon, reach out to myself, reach out to anyone, but don't stay in the stuck, like negative self-talk, crappy relationship, shitty business, bad body if you've got, health issues. So you mentioned earlier that the basis of a good relationship was a good relationship with yourself. So I'm assuming that's a big part of the work that you do. What can you tell our listeners today that they can start doing today that can help them start to love themselves again?
Right. Yeah. So my book is available on Amazon, and you can actually open up the first 30 pages, and it has basically what I'm going to share with you. It's noticing what you're saying to yourself, those negative narratives, noticing where they came from. And then the next step is to notice how you talk to other people. Like if Brad's having a bad day and I show up, I'm like, dude, are you all right? And then I'm going to be supportive and encouraging and caring and empathic. All those things are who I am as a person and the kind of relationships I create with other people. If my inside doesn't match that, then I need to change it to that. So I'm not, you're not old enough to remember this, but back in the 80s, there was this self-affirmation movement where you sit in front of the mirror and go, I like myself and all that. And Saturday Night Live had a super cool spoof.
Oh, I remember
it. It was hilarious.
Yes. What it was like the church lady or I love myself or
I love myself and I'm okay or something like that. So it's not that. That's garbage. But what it is you taking you and creating that kind of relationship with yourself. So all the things that I would say to somebody else if they were struggling, I need to keep myself accountable to doing that with myself. And it's hard because these habits are really automatic. And we talk to ourselves somewhere between 40,000 and 70,000 times a day.
Whoa.
So if we are running ourselves down, imagine somebody sitting behind you going, you suck, you're fat, you're ugly, you're such a loser, you're so stupid. But we're doing that to ourselves and not even aware of it. And if you're doing that over and over all day, every day, man, you are just suffering. And then when someone says something or cuts you off in traffic, you're like, because your insides are just such a mess. So you've got to switch it around and become your own best friend, calm yourself, talk to yourself, do the stuff that you do for others.
So you think the guy that I'm playing pickleball with that's hitting himself saying idiot, do you think he's not aware of that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I'm so hyper aware of it now.
It's an occupational hazard.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that people aren't aware of that, right? So, Shannon, in what you just said, you said one of the steps, I think it was the second, is you've got to figure out where it comes from. What guidance or advice can you give the person who's listening that wants to figure out, gosh, I do talk negatively to myself way too much. Where is it coming from? How do they figure that out besides calling you up or calling me up?
Yeah. And if it's always ideal to have somebody, but that's why I started my YouTube channel and all those videos are free because I know millions of people in the world will never have a therapist or a coach or anybody else. So you got to do it yourself. I think one of the things is to notice all those make that list of all those toxic things you say. Notice if it comes up for you, like my brother used to say that, or my mom, kind of made me feel that way. Or, my dad would make me feel that way when he would blow up over, the A- I got or whatever. So noticing those connections and then, listing those off, recognizing that those are not truths about you. And then make your list of your character qualities, your values, what matters to you, how you treat other people. Those are your traits, and that is who you are. So that next piece is really critical. And then when you notice those things about you, I had a young man that I worked with, and he was such a neat young man, had lots of wonderful qualities. And, even sitting with him for 1 hour, I could list them off. When I asked him to list off his good character qualities and attributes, he had nothing. So I talked to him and fed back to him some of the things I saw, and tears came to his eyes. It's like, I believe you, and I understand that that's how other people see me. That's how my friends see me. That's how my work colleagues see me. But I've never seen myself that way, and I've never had anybody tell me that before. And so when he got sort of through that emotion, it was a beautiful thing. And he was able to say, yeah, those things are true. So I had him write those down, journal about them, so that anytime this other stuff came up, which was from horrible abuse, then he would say, that's a lie. That's a lie that came from that a-hole so-and-so. This is what's true about me. So that transition, those realizations, those are really powerful, and it changes a person's life forever.
Yeah, I agree. I want to reiterate what you said. The negative talk that you're saying about yourself is untrue. So much suffering in this world is self-inflicted. You cannot suffer when you live in the truth. For 47 years, I lived in the untruth that I was not enough. So I had to do everything in my power to try to make me enough. And all along, I was enough. And it cost 2 marriages and millions of dollars in business mistakes and the use of weed and alcohol and kids with behavioral problems, all because I lived with this untrue narrative that there was something wrong with me. So, yeah. Really powerful. Jesus once said, whether you're religious or not, because it's true whether he said it or not, the truth shall set you free. It's so true. Just start living in the fact that you are a really good human being at your core. You may have done stuff you're not proud of, but the stuff you did that you weren't proud of was just because your body and your mind was trying to protect you from something it thought was worse. So you touched on a client. Can you give us another client success story that illustrates the impact of everything that we've been talking about?
Yeah. And so another client that comes to mind is a woman who, when she first started working with me, she just said she had so much anxiety and depression. And so we would talk about that. And she really didn't want to talk about her life that much, just this anxiety and depression, as if it was something that, came on like, I don't know, a storm, and for her, it was. She was so unconscious about where that was coming from. As I talked to her about her life currently and her life in the past, she came from horrible abuse, and she was in a really toxic marriage. Somebody who had no respect for her, blew up at every turn, ran her down, just made her feel like garbage all the time. Finally, I said to her, if I lived in your marriage, I would be anxious and depressed too. And that was the first time she realized that this was really unhealthy, and that it was not that she had anxiety and depression. It was that she was being triggered into fight or flight nonstop all day, every day. So as she got in touch with her thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs, and she didn't want to get divorced, so she tried really hard to just bring all that to the table. The more she brought that to the table, the more his microaggressions became macroaggressions. So yeah. And so she was able to step back. I also teach people, step back and watch the circus. That person is going to have their own circus no matter what you do. And if you show up fully, see what happens. Do they honor and respect you? Do they apologize? Or do they just escalate and get more self-centered and more abusive? And this is what that guy did. And so she was able to go, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. And then she could divorce without feeling guilty, without feeling like she did the wrong thing or that she didn't honor her marriage vows or any of that stuff, because she got to see it for herself. And she was treating herself so differently that when he would do these things, she'd be like, that's not about me. That's your stuff. So that's how it works. And ideally.
Love it. Love it. So if people want to reach out to you to find out more about you or schedule a call with you, or take one of your courses or find your book, where should they go?
So a couple of places, but healfromtoxicrelationships.com is a good place to start. Also, nofoggydays.com is where my book is sort of on my website. It's sort of a landing page. Amazon and Kindle have Out of the Fog into the Clear, journaling to help you heal from toxic relationships. And I'm happy to help. Also, Therapist Talks Thrive Beyond Narcissism is my YouTube channel, and there's tons of stuff on there.
Awesome. Well, Shannon, that was amazing. Thank you for all the knowledge that you have shared with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Brad. It's been a pleasure.
That concludes another episode of How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs. Remember, I'm on a mission to help 1 million people radically change their life by getting rid of these self-limiting beliefs that are hidden in their subconscious mind. I can't do this alone. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours on this podcast. If I could just ask you for a small favor in return, and that is like it, share it, rate it, review it, anything you can do to spread this message to help me reach my goal of helping 1 million people would be greatly appreciated. Until next time, love heals all.
Hit subscribe if you don't want to miss out on more life-changing content. And if you're struggling, you don't have to. Go to bradchandler.com/contact. There, you can join the Facebook community of like-minded entrepreneurs, and you'll see a button to schedule your freedom and happiness call. See you on the next episode.